He's as precious as apple pie, my mother-in-law Nancy exclaimed the first time she laid eyes on my newborn son. She lavished him with so much affection that it was obvious how deeply she loved him. She even eagerly looked after him when I was at work. At the time, I hadn't fully grasped the extent of her adoration. My name is Emily, and I'm 28 years old, working full-time. I married my husband Liam a year ago, and shortly after, we moved in with his parents. Before moving in, I had some reservations, but my relationship with my mother-in-law seemed generally positive. She even helped us with household chores, which was appreciated since my husband and I were both juggling busy work schedules. However, there was one aspect that troubled me, her constant inquiries about our plans to have children. It's been a year since you got married. Aren't you planning on starting a family soon? You're not getting any younger, you know. These daily remarks were beginning to weigh heavily on me. Though I wanted children eventually, we had financial considerations to address first. From my perspective, a year of marriage was still just the beginning, and I wanted to ensure we were financially stable before starting a family. It was clear my mother-in-law was eager for grandchildren, but her persistence was adding unnecessary pressure. One evening, after Nancy had gone to bed, I decided to broach the topic with Liam. She keeps bringing up the topic of kids. How do you feel about it? Her daily remarks are putting a lot of stress on me, I confided. Liam seemed taken aback, apologizing for not realizing how persistent his mother had been. He assured me he would talk to her about it. Then he proposed something. Not because Mom is pushing us, but should we start thinking about having a child? My upcoming promotion might lead to a salary increase, which could give us more financial flexibility. Plus, it might be wise to try for a baby while you're still young, Emily, he suggested. Liam wasn't pressuring me, but he wanted us to consider the idea more seriously. If your salary is going to increase, that might be a good idea. I'll think about it, but for now, please speak to Nancy about giving us some space. I agreed, requesting time to consider our options. A few days later, Liam spoke to his mother, and thankfully, her constant prodding eased. The topic of having children stopped being a direct conversation, and my stress levels gradually decreased. Once things calmed down, I found myself more open to the possibility of starting a family. A few months later, Liam and I agreed to wait for his promotion to be confirmed before trying for a baby. Half a year later, everything fell into place, and I found out I was pregnant. We were overjoyed, but no one was more thrilled than Nancy, who had been eagerly waiting for the moment she could become a grandmother. Every day, she was restless with excitement, constantly checking in on me, which was endearing. Although I hadn't appreciated her earlier impatience, I understood her eagerness to welcome a grandchild. Gradually, I found myself growing more at ease in my interactions with her. A few months later, the day of my delivery arrived. With the support of my husband and Nancy, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy, despite my initial fears and worries. We named him Jackson. Holding our little son brought me an indescribable sense of joy. After the delivery, I took parental leave to focus on caring for our newborn. As a first-time mother, I was learning the ropes of child rearing, which proved more challenging than I had anticipated. Nonetheless, the joy of having Jackson far outweighed the difficulties, and I treasured every moment with him. Time seemed to fly by, and before I knew it, Jackson was nearly a year old, and my parental leave was coming to an end. I planned to return to work, but we encountered an unexpected hurdle. We couldn't find a child care center. We knew there was a shortage, but the difficulty of securing a spot caught us off guard. Liam and I were left unsure of what to do next. I ultimately chose to extend my parental leave. During that time, Jackson continued to grow, and by the time he was nearly 2, I was ready to return to work. We still hadn't found a child care center, but Nancy offered to take care of Jackson. Emily, you don't want to quit your job, do you? I'm always home, so please don't hesitate to leave him with me, she said. I'd be lonely without him. Her offer was a blessing. With our son nearing 2, Liam and I planned to enroll him in preschool when he turned 3. There appeared to be enough availability at nearby kindergartens, and we thought we could manage for another year. For the past 2 years, we'd shared childcare responsibilities with my mother-in-law, whom we trusted completely with our son's care. Thanks to her, I successfully returned to work, and everything was going smoothly. Our life was harmonious and free of complaints. A year after adopting this routine, as our son was nearing his 3rd birthday, I noticed something unusual about him. He used to greet me excitedly when I returned home, but now he seemed distant. He was constantly by my mother-in-law's side, hesitant to engage with me. I thought perhaps he had grown too attached to Nancy since she was his primary caretaker. Still, I made every effort to connect with him and wondered what might be causing the shift. Then, a more troubling issue arose. Jackson had suddenly stopped speaking almost entirely. As he had grown older, he had become a chatty child, sometimes even to the point of excess. Now, it was as if he were a completely different person, silent and withdrawn. I wondered whether my absence was causing him to feel lonely or if there was something else going on. My husband also noticed something was amiss, so we decided to take him to the hospital for an evaluation. However, my mother-in-law strongly opposed the idea. A hospital? Jackson's fine. He's a good boy, she insisted. I'm the one taking care of him, so trust me. Don't label him as sick. My mother-in-law protested frantically. Her strong resistance raised my suspicions. Normally, a protective mother would want to rush to the hospital if she thought something was wrong. Yet she was actively opposing us taking him. My previous trust in her caring for our son now began to waver. My husband also sensed something off about my mother-in-law and brought it up one night after she went to bed. Do you really think nothing's wrong with Jackson? Mom's so adamant that he's fine, but I think we should get him checked out, he said. I agreed with my husband. Our once lively, talkative son had become completely subdued. No matter how much my mother-in-law insisted he was fine, we couldn't just ignore the changes in him. We decided on the spot to take him to the hospital right away. A few days later, my husband adjusted his work schedule to match mine, and we took our son to the hospital. My mother-in-law remained unhappy about our decision. I told you he's fine. This is a wild goose chase, she grumbled as we left the house. She initially wanted to accompany us, but my husband suggested it would be best if just the two of us went. Ignoring her irritation, we set out for the hospital with our son. Our focus was entirely on our child, not on my mother-in-law's reactions. Throughout the drive, our son remained silent. My husband and I tried to lift his spirits, but our efforts were in vain. We exchanged worried glances, wondering if something could be wrong with him. Once we arrived at the hospital, our son underwent a series of tests while my husband and I anxiously awaited the doctor's diagnosis. We were prepared to accept any result calmly, but the doctor's findings were unexpected. Despite the numerous tests, the doctor found no physical abnormalities in our son. A sense of relief washed over us, but it left us puzzled. What had caused our son to change so dramatically? To our questions, the doctor suggested it could be something psychological. My husband and I discussed various possibilities on our way home from the hospital, but couldn't come to any definitive conclusions. As soon as we arrived home, my mother-in-law, as if lying in wait, immediately asked about the test results. When we told her there were no physical issues, she responded with a triumphant, "See, I told you so." We deliberately refrained from mentioning the possibility of a psychological aspect, knowing she would likely cause a fuss over it. From then on, my husband and I paid even closer attention to our son, keeping a watchful eye on his behavior and well-being. I made an effort to return home from work earlier than usual to spend more time with our son. My husband did the same, making an effort to converse with him more often and share activities like bath time, hoping to establish a strong bond and better communication. As we adjusted our schedules and devoted more time to our son, gradual changes began to appear. He still didn't speak much, but he started approaching me with a smile, much like he did before. My husband and I reflected on our actions, realizing we may have inadvertently made him feel lonely. I even considered the possibility of quitting my job. Then, one day after work, I arrived home to find our son eagerly waiting to greet me. Such a sight had become rare, and it filled me with joy. As I patted his head and told him to wait in the living room while I changed, my mother-in-law emerged from the living room. Just as I was about to head to the bedroom, she stopped me, saying she needed to discuss something about our son. Lately, Jackson has been showing a defiant attitude towards me. Did you say anything to him? She asked calmly, but her smile seemed strained, sending a shiver down my spine. Defiant? I haven't seen that, and I haven't said anything to him, I replied. Upon hearing my response, my mother-in-law's expression hardened, and she began to raise her voice slightly. He's been ignoring my instructions. It's absurd for him to rebel against me when I've been caring for him, she exclaimed. Her reaction left me taken aback. My mother-in-law, who had previously insisted that nothing was wrong with our son when we took him to the hospital, was now labeling him as abnormal. Her words only heightened my growing mistrust. Until now, I had entrusted my son's care to her, reassured by her apparent affection for him. But now, I questioned whether that had been a mistake. While I hadn't observed any strange behavior from her while we were home together, the uneasy feeling about my mother-in-law persisted and was hard to shake. I decided to uncover the truth on my own. After a conversation with my mother-in-law, I pulled out an old voice recorder I had used for work and discreetly set it up in the living room the next morning. Spying on my family made me uneasy, and I feared my husband might disapprove, so I kept the plan to myself. Naturally, I didn't inform my mother-in-law either, as the goal was to monitor her interactions. The following day, after returning from work, I retrieved the recorder from the living room and played back the recording in the privacy of our bedroom. What I heard was shocking. The words my mother-in-law had spoken were unimaginable. My hand trembled from the impact, and a surge of anger swept through me. I was furious with my mother-in-law and with myself for not noticing her behavior sooner. After composing myself, I contacted my husband and asked him to come home as soon as possible. I was considering leaving the house with our son. I apologized to him for recording without his consent and attached the audio file I had retrieved. After sending him the recording, I quickly returned to the living room, gathered my son, and took him to the bedroom. My mother-in-law seemed slightly irritated but didn't say anything as I settled our son down for sleep. As I waited for my husband to return home, I found solace in watching my son's peaceful sleeping face. Suddenly, I heard the sound of my husband entering the house, followed by the echo of his raised voice from the living room. "Hey, Mom, what's going on?" he exclaimed, his hurried footsteps revealing his urgency. Rushing to the living room as quietly as possible, so as not to disturb my sleeping son, I found my mother-in-law standing there, visibly taken aback by my husband's uncharacteristic anger. Attempting to calm him down, I reminded him, "Jackson is sleeping." My words seemed to bring him back to his senses, and he took a deep breath before motioning for my mother-in-law to sit in front of us. Confused, she stammered, "Wait, what's happening?" Placing the recorder in front of her, I proceeded to explain why my husband and I were upset. "Sorry, but we recorded you while you were alone with Jackson. Can you explain this to us?" I asked before pressing play on the stored audio. The room was filled with the unsettling sound of my mother-in-law's voice, uttering numerous words directed at my son. Despite the discomfort, my husband and I silently endured, allowing her to listen. "When will you understand? I am your mom. You should call me Mom, okay? That woman is not your mom, so don't get along with her, even when she comes back. You've been clinging to that woman lately, and you even welcomed her home yesterday. But you don't have to do that." To my shock, my mother-in-law was demanding that our son call her Mama, even instructing him not to get close to me, his actual mother, upon my return home. Stunned into silence, I could hardly believe what I was hearing. When I first heard the recording, I realized it explained why our son had been acting strangely. My husband listened in disbelief as he heard his mother referring to me, Emily Wright, and teaching our son that I wasn't his real mother. He confronted his mother, calm yet clearly angry. Re-listening to the recording only deepened the disturbing reality of what had been happening. "You're mistaken. It's just a game. I was trying to make things fun for him." My mother-in-law feebly defended herself. But what kind of game involved denying our son his relationship with his mother? It was appalling to think she had acted normal around us while secretly filling our son's head with this harmful nonsense. "You called our son abnormal, but who's the abnormal one here?" My husband questioned. Our son simply wanted to be with his mother, and for that, she had labeled him as unusual. "Is this your idea of a game?" he pressed. "Do you really think such an excuse will work? Explain yourself." My usually gentle husband confronted his mother with a stern expression, demanding an explanation. Cornered, she remained silent, keeping her head down. Finally, my husband, losing patience, slammed the table. "We cannot allow someone who acts so irrationally to be near our son. We're leaving this house." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law's demeanor changed. She quickly looked up in alarm. "Leave? What do you mean? You can't." She started apologizing profusely, realizing what our departure would mean for her life. Losing access to her grandson and our financial support would put her in a difficult position. I felt deep contempt when she only seemed concerned about her situation once her comfort was threatened. Do you think an apology can fix this? Do you understand how our 3-year-old son felt? I said, tears welling up at the thought of our son's emotional distress. My husband's eyes were red with anger and sadness as he turned his gaze on his mother. We're leaving whether you like it or not. As far as we're concerned, you're no longer family. With that, he took my hand, and we went to our room to pack. We took our sleeping son and left the house. As soon as we were outside, my husband apologized for his mother's behavior, but I couldn't place all the blame on her. We should have noticed earlier and kept him away from her, I said. My husband agreed, murmuring his acknowledgement. But the decision to cut ties with my mother-in-law was one we had to make for the well-being of our son. It was clear the situation was harming him, and we needed to act. As we talked, we hailed a cab and headed for my parents' home, ready to start a new chapter for our family. Before confronting my mother-in-law, I had reached out to my parents for support, and they welcomed us warmly. At my parents' house, my husband spoke gently to our son about his grandmother and listened to his side of the story. However, as expected, our son remained silent, possibly hiding a deeper hurt. Let's give him time to talk when he's ready, we agreed, aiming to keep him calm while considering counseling for him. Jackson, I'm sorry. From now on, it will just be the 3 of us, Mom, Dad, and you. You don't have to worry anymore, my husband said, gently patting our son's head. Then, in a small voice, our son spoke, I don't like Grandma. Surprised, I reacted, Jackson, can you talk? Both my husband and I held back tears as we waited for our son to share more. With our reassurance that he wouldn't be living with his grandmother anymore, he slowly opened up about his fear of her anger and her attempts to convince him I was a wicked demon. He shared his confusion and his struggle to understand how to reconcile his love for both his parents with his grandmother's behavior. Listening to him speak, I deeply regretted trusting my mother-in-law and prioritizing work. My husband and I apologized to our son and reassured him that from now on, it would just be the 3 of us together, and we would protect him. We lived with my parents until we found a new home, and without my mother-in-law's interference, our son gradually regained his cheerful self and resumed speaking normally with me. Seeing his smile return filled me with relief and gratitude. My husband regularly received messages from his mother begging us to return, but he never responded. I used the blocking feature on my phone to avoid her messages. Recently, my husband went back to his parents' house alone to retrieve our belongings. He said he completely ignored his mother, who cried like a child. Even seeing her in such a state, I felt no sympathy. My husband declared that protecting our family was his priority, and he would not tolerate anyone, even family, causing us harm. I was deeply grateful for his quick actions to protect our son. Living with my precious family is my greatest happiness. Eventually, my husband severed all contact with his mother, and we moved to a new home. We arranged with a relative to notify us if anything happens to her, and according to them, she's become increasingly depressed, spending her days alone in her large house. Meanwhile, we moved to a secure condominium and began our new life. I left my job to spend more time with our son, and together, my husband and I focused on supporting our son's mental health. As a result, our son seems back to his energetic self. Sometimes he can be a handful, but I find it endearing. I want to continue watching over my husband and son to ensure that our son never has to endure such difficulties again, as that is our greatest happiness.